Beth, by the way.
I picked up on that. I don't know about everybody else, but.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Don, I heard you. Do we have Cindy, Brad, or Ken?
Cindy's here.
Brad? Fabulous.
All right, guys, the live stream is operable on YouTube.
Fantastic.
We're missing Ken and Beth. Okay.
So Beth's on.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed you, Beth.
It's all good.
All right. Ken's liable to be busy at the moment. Maybe he'll be here in a minute. I'll text him and tell him. Right now, then I guess we can get started.
I know Richard's going to join in a second. Just be aware.
All right, I just texted Ken, reminded him he's might be busy at the moment. He just came home with his child yesterday.
Yeah.
All right. Brandon, if Rich is going to join us in a few minutes here, let's go ahead and get started a little bit.
Yeah.
So do we have call the meeting to order? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
All right, Beth's got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Brad, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you. All right, Mr. LaFawn and Mr. Smith, meal delivery update.
All right, meal delivery program is running smoothly this week. We kept everything running as it has been the last 2 weeks. There is going to be a revision in it starting next week. It's not a cutback, it's just kind of the natural progression of the routing that will allow us to consolidate some things. That we're going to cut out a few sites where there's very few meals being served. It's not a big cutback. I'll let Mr. Smith explain how many drop sites and how many buses are going to be taken out. But it's not a lot, but there is a few. And one of the things I'd like the board to know is we ran the numbers on last week. There was some concern about the amount of waste, and we ran the numbers, and Vernon said the waste is about 3.7%, so it's less than 4%. That's coming back, which is pretty amazing. That's right in line with what they have during the regular school year. So the waste is not. It sounded like a lot, but when you do the percentages, it's not that bad at all. So I'll let Mr. Smith talk about the routing now.
Good morning, board members. The plan is we're going to consolidate some stops, which will eliminate 5 stops that we've had very low participation at or any participation at, and which will allow us to reduce by 4 runs, which will bring the buses used from 29 to 25, which will allow us to free up the staff on those buses to help staff any shortages we have on those routes. We're going to develop a timeline to push this out to the public, so we have plenty of time so everyone knows for a smooth transition. That's basically the plan.
How many drops again?
We're dropping 5 drops.
So we down to 50 drops. 25 buses, 50 drops.
The food is still being served at the original 6 sites and being prepared at 4 sites right now.
Okay. Which 5 are you going to drop? Do you know yet?
Yes, sir. It's going to be Antioch Church over in the Pender District, Shiloh Fire Department, which is on 421 in Malcolm's district, Cape Fear Community Fellowship, which is on 117 in Travis' district, Forest Hills Baptist Church, which is here in Burgaw, and Topsail Beach Town Hall in Surf City.
Okay. thanks.
Yes, sir.
Do the 50 drops include the sites or not? So is it 5 sites and 50 drops? Or 6 sites? 6 sites and 50 drops.
50 drops, yes.
All right, anyone got any questions?
So, board, I got some questions. I sent you an email. Okay, this thing's back feeding on me. I sent you an email basically that the TAs have some concerns. They have been asking about possibly something like hazard pay. Are they going to continue to work? Could they go home and work? So there's some indications that the TAs who are working on this program at this point have some concerns and are waiting for us to give them answers today or tomorrow, basically, about what next week looks like. So my question to the board is, do you want to just run this and see what happens, who shows up, or do you want to go ahead and preemptively tell us to create or invent PD for TAs and let them stay home?
Hey, Steve, I've got a question about that. Are these TAs, have they been designated as essential personnel for meal delivery purposes, or what are they doing?
Right now,
I don't think that's not clear to me.
You guys
Yes, the TAs that are working with the meals program are definitely been deemed essential personnel for that purpose.
So,
Okay, and is that who you're talking about, Steve?
right, but we're doing a considerable amount more than other counties around us as far as drop sites. And the other counties around us have sent a lot of TAs home with PD packets. And so that is now in our county, and that's the question they're putting to us. So, in other words, we have 3, basically, if you look at the plan that was submitted at the last board meeting for food service, there's 3 waves. And so I'm asking the board, do you want to preemptively go ahead and consider handling this, or do you want to wait for it to become a situation where employees don't show up and we've got to handle it on the reactive side? Because I'm not sure with the questions that are coming from the TAs now, seeing that other TAs in other counties are going home and getting packets, and then they're coming off the essential staff list, I guess, and the bus drivers are considered essential staff. So that's the question at hand right now.
Well, it sounds to me like you guys have assigned them a job, and they can either show up to do their job or they can't. Right? I mean, that's...
But we could also provide them telework and go back to phase 3, I guess, is if you want to look at it. So we could phase back the food delivery service, give them telework, and let them go home. And then a large majority of the people who will be essential staff will be contract workers at that point, and then some bus drivers. And then we could eventually probably phase back bus drivers, possibly, with packet work. So, I mean, there's...
So what kind of telework can a teacher's aide do?
Professional development is what's going on. They're setting up professional development items for them, especially EC right now. And they're going through a lot of online work and continue to do that. Similar to some of our teachers that were doing it for the first 2 weeks.
So this is something that'll take them 8 hours a day, 5 days a week to do? Teleworking?
I doubt. I mean, I can't answer that, but we'll offer them the best we can.
How do we decide what hours are appropriate? I mean, we can't send people home without things to do if they don't have work to do and pay them.
Exactly.
Not very, very good as a holder of the taxpayers' dollars. I mean, if they've got work that'll keep them busy at home that we can justify, then that's one thing. But if we're just sending them home for the sake of sending them home and paying them, there's several employees out there. The nail technicians, the hairdressers, they would all love that. How do we justify? We got to be able to justify.
That's right.
Well, and I think this goes back to my original point, which is if we're currently using them as essential personnel to deliver the food service to our kids, why would we send them home and modify our food schedule
Because that's what other counties around us are
If they're
doing.
serving, if they're, and I guess my point is, if they're doing something essential for us now, why would we change? And unless we have a reason to change. Because the board's concern is well noted. Like if you're going to send folks home and pay them, you either need to monitor that they're completing this within a timely fashion in order to capture the time paid, or figure out a way to ensure that they're actually working the hours that are required in order to be paid. Like some sort of oversight.
They can, I don't know if we can track them every minute they're on a class, but we can track what they complete and not complete if they turn in for continuing education units. Whether I can say they're checking in at 8 o'clock and checking out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, no. I don't know there's a district in this state that can do that. I mean, this is unprecedented times. I mean, we were told to give them the best ability of all to work at home and to work with it and make something happen at the local level. Those are our directions from the state representatives. So we're not prepared to have somebody working 8 hours.
That's your directive from the governor. But if you've already got them working for you, if they're already doing an essential job, then I don't understand the need to transition them to work from home. Because you don't need them to work from home. You need them to be on the bus doing what they're currently doing.
Okay, we'll ask them. I'm just telling the board ahead of time, what we're getting from our employees is we understand there's TAs who are working from home. We want that option. What are you going, and we want an answer by next week. So I need some direction. Do we preemptively set up some telework for these guys, or do we tell them, no, you need to report to work? Physically report to work.
So you talked to all the other districts, and they're telling you that they're doing PD with their TAs, right? Their IAs.
No, I've not talked to all the
How
other
long have
districts.
they?
I've talked to the districts that they've referenced, and finance has sent out some fillers, and HR sent out some fillers, and we're finding out that districts they mentioned, like Brunswick was one of them. New Hanover's paying time and a half, but they're not doing as many sites. Blayton's doing it, so they're sending TAs home and allowing them to do PD. Onslow's doing it too.
They were doing the meals, except for the meal people. Helping with meals, and those who were not helping with meals, principals were assigning PD as that cater to their needs at their individual schools, and that's what they're doing at home. So it's really case by case in different districts around us, and of course, Duke and everybody's home. Same with Wayne.
But the ones doing the meals, the teacher assistants are still coming. They're being paid in city hours.
So the board basically, do you want us to offer the option of teleworking to TAs? They request it.
Okay, let me clarify this question. So is the question, if they are TAs who are currently doing food service, do we want to offer them the option to telework, or are there TAs who are not currently working, who are not being paid, that we want to offer professional development in order to compensate them for time they would not otherwise be working? Because I think... Okay, two types of TAs. Are all your TAs working on food delivery service, yes or no?
No.
Okay, so is the idea that you have TAs who are currently at home not getting paid because they're not working?
No.
Yes.
They're in different positions. Some TAs are working at school doing some things for some principals.
Today, they're all taking annual leave because it's spring break.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I'm trying to understand is you're asking the board for a blanket rule to allow TAs the option of teleworking, but some of those employees are essential personnel for meal delivery, and some of them are currently reporting into the school, serving the school for instructional purposes. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Well, they're not coming to the schools now because as of this week, or coming back, because we've gone to shelter in place, we're asking them to, they'll either report periodically to keep the doors open, but that,
This week is spring break.
well, this week they're off. I
Yeah,
mean, this week is a break to buy time to talk about this stuff. But there's different TAs, there's very few of them that are doing anything other than food service. I mean, the brunt of them are doing food service. And then we may have a few, one or two here and there that are doing some things that principals ask them to do inside of their schools, because we ask the principals first if there's something that was urgent. And we have one or two case by case that are actually filling in long term for teachers who are acting as the teachers. So there is no blanket, it's just a matter of we gonna offer them the option to telework, case by case.
We have a few who are at home based on either compromised immune systems or because of family members whose immune systems would be compromised if they were exposed themselves. So in cases like that, principals have still assigned work for them to do. Some of them
Feedback, try again.
Hello?
yes, some of them are submitting or assisting teachers via Google Hangouts and so forth, pulling and prepping work for some of the students to work on, but there are very few of them. But those are the ones who had medical documentation submitted. So that's different from the other cases.
Okay.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Hey, there's a wide range of what's being done around the state with TAs. And basically, if you've got a need for them and designate them as essential personnel, then unless they need to stay out, everything you're doing is fine. You know, as it is. And you don't have to, you know, all TAs aren't created equal. You don't have to do everything the same for all TAs. You can have some doing one thing, some doing another thing. So you're fine doing what you're doing right now. If the board wants to tell you to change, the board can do that. But what you're doing right now is consistent with what's allowed, completely consistent with what's allowed and expected.
Well, I think the question here, Rich, is just like it's going on in hospitals and everywhere else, and it's just the fact they're kind of getting more concerned as more and more stories come out, and the question is, if other districts are seeing that their employees could go home and limit the number of employees that have to work, would we consider limiting the number of employees that have to be on site and letting them go home and telework? I mean, that's the real question that's going to be on our
Teachers' aides draw unemployment.
And the answer is, you know, you still have to do the essential services you're providing.
Right.
If you want to modify the services, you can. If you don't need to.
Well, that's the question. Do we want to modify our services? Because we'd have to modify our services because basically we're a little bit unique because if we modified our services back to the final phase, because we have basically a 3-phase service plan for food, then it would be mostly almost 95 to 90 higher percent employees would be contract employees, and none of our staff will be out working. There'd only be just a few, because it'd be Aramark and ABM doing most of the service.
You've got some neighboring districts that aren't delivering food at all.
Right.
That have people doing drive-through.
So we're way out doing a lot more, and the questions coming out is, do we drop back to what other districts are doing, basically serve out of a half dozen schools and send our people home? I mean, that's the real question.
Well, I've seen New Hanover starting Monday, started at 20 meal sites, all 20 schools, and they're starting to push theirs out on buses also. And they're also using volunteers, caregivers, and parents as means of getting their meals out. Our teachers' aides, are they eligible for unemployment benefits?
No. I mean,
If we don't have work for them to do at home, we'd have to fire them if they didn't come to work before they could draw unemployment benefits?
yes, essentially, because they're all, they're all being paid right now.
But they're being paid because they're doing a job. I mean, if they go to teleworking, and they don't make 40 hours a week, then that's a reduction in hours. Are they eligible then for unemployment benefits to make up the difference?
No, they're not. They're being paid. They're being paid full pay whether we're calling them into work or not.
Okay, so but just to be sure, if we have a TA who has a medical concern, either they have someone at home who is maybe immunodeficient or whatever, they can bring in a doctor's note and say, I have to stay home, and we can give them work to stay home, right?
Well,
That's correct.
That's correct. They could qualify. Yeah, that's what I was about to say, Brad.
Yeah.
So they could qualify for the new emergency paid sick leave potentially. If they're caring for someone who is under a doctor's care, and I'll get you the specific language in 1 second. Hold on.
They can also qualify for the new emergency state leave.
Right.
And all that went out to every employee this week. All that information about taking that leave. Just FYI.
How many employees have requested this leave?
None, yeah, I mean.
None as of, the time this information was sent out on yesterday. A couple have contacted.
Okay.
We had some from the previous time, prior to April 1, who had already submitted information about their medical conditions, and that was like approximately 5 people. But now that this information was pushed out to all employees yesterday, we have not received any requests yet.
Okay. Let me ask a question just for clarification. When you're talking about the information that was pushed out yesterday to all employees, you're talking about the new federal leaves, the emergency paid sick leave, and the emergency FMLA.
Yes.
Okay. In addition to that, the State Board of Education last Friday passed a new regulation authorizing emergency state leave. And the emergency state leave covers 2 different types of period. The period from March 16 through March 31, and the period from April 1 through April 30th. Okay? And so there are different types of leave that can be taken from beginning April 1. There's the emergency paid sick leave, there's the emergency family medical leave, there's original FMLA, and then there are different types of leave under the new emergency state leave. And so under the original emergency state, under the new emergency state leave, if the employee is eligible, which is going to be almost all of your employees, they're entitled to that leave. But if they're on an annual leave day, like spring break, then they don't get the emergency state leave. They just take their normal annual leave like they would on spring break. If they're not on spring break, they're entitled to that leave unless you offer them work and they refuse it. And if you offer them work and they refuse it, then they are not eligible. Okay? So if they refuse work, they're not eligible. But if they refuse work because of COVID-19 symptoms, then it's different. Then they'd be eligible for, this leave or the state, or the federal leave.
Basically,
Richard, the directive requires us to do this food service, right?
Yes, you're required to keep doing food service.
it's the level of food service that we're discussing, and Rich has explained several types of leaves that will be available to employees next week, or now actually, so those questions are starting to come in, and we're just trying to get some direction because we're going to have to answer these questions within 24 hours.
And we're working on some guidance that deals with the intersection of that the new federal leave and the new state leave. There are a lot of places where they don't mesh well, but we're putting together something for you on that should be going out very soon.
I guess, it goes back to what I asked the board. Do we want to offer the option or tell them to show up to work? If they don't, then what?
If you tell them to show up to work and they refuse to show up to work and they don't have a COVID-19 related reason, then they're not eligible for the state leave.
So board, do you want us to tell employees to show up and physically work and not offer them the option to stay home? Or do you want us to offer the option? It's feedback.
Well, what does everybody want to do?
How we can justify, how can they justify their time at home? Because I have to justify this to people that ask me, how are we paying employees to sit home? And I've got to have a truthful reason to tell them that what they're gainfully doing.
And just getting PD at home ain't gonna cut it. That's not gonna answer, that's not gonna make people feel any better for us to try to substantiate it that way.
Well, if you're offering PD at home or not offering PD at home, if you're not requiring them to come to work, they're gonna be entitled to this state leave.
Gotcha.
Okay, so, PD at home is something that some districts are offering or requiring, on the theory that, okay, we never have time to do this and, there's some value to it.
It's a very difficult decision because there are so many people that's unemployed right now that don't have an opportunity to sit at home and do, work from home. They're unemployed. It's very difficult I've got to be able to justify.
Well, and just my thought, if we didn't have a legitimate essential need right now for them to be delivering meals, then this would be another conversation. But right now we do.
True.
If they've got a with everything that the state of North Carolina has put in place right now for COVID-19 protections, as far as going out on emergency leave and such, I feel like if they have a legitimate reason to work, if we can work with them if they have to work from home. If they bring in something from a doctor saying, yes, I need to stay home, if they can work, then maybe we can work something out with them that they could possibly telecommute. But as long as we have meal delivery, it's like you said, Brad, it's a tough decision, but I think that there's been enough things put in play that right now essential personnel has to do their job.
I agree.
Well, it sounds like we need to keep it as is what everybody wants. Is that right?
I think so.
I do too.
This is Rich. Is Ken on this call or not?
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I just had my phone on mute.
Is my understanding.
All right. Anybody got anything else for this one?
Well, it's my understanding from the board, it's unanimous that the board wants to continue to tell TAs to show up for work or not, or they either show up for work or they show up with a doctor's note. That's the two options they have.
Steve, it's not just a doctor's note, it's any healthcare professional, and there's some new guidance that just came out late yesterday from the U.S. Department of Labor that elaborates on some of the guidance they previously put out and makes clear that it's the definition of a healthcare professional is to be extremely broadly interpreted. It can include somebody who works in a medical office. Doesn't have to be a licensed professional or not, or doctor or anything. So it would be, a nurse, somebody working in the doctor's office, whether they're licensed or not, teachers, a physician's assistant, nurse practitioner, anybody. It's a very, very broad definition of who it applies to. So if you have any particular questions about that, Alfreda should give us a call.
She'll be working with you on it, I'm sure. Okay. And we have our marching orders. Next. Basically, Mr. Chairman, our understanding is TAs report to work or have a note based on the description that Mr. Schwartz just recommended. Those are the two options for TAs at this time from the board. Is that correct?
Sorry about that, guys. US Cellular failed me. Did anybody have any more questions?
I think, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Hill, could you repeat that again?
Yes, ma'am. So basically, the end result of the conversation here is that TAs are required to report to work or either produce documentation from any emergency personnel individual that was just described by Mr. Schwartz.
Well, that should be, Steve, if TAs were designated. Yeah. Somebody got a lot of wind going on there or something. Steve, what that should be is that TAs who are designated as essential personnel should be required to report, unless they have a COVID-19 reason not to. Is there consensus on that from the board? That's what Dr. Hill's asking.
Good with me.
Yes, I thought he was directing the question to the chair, that's why I hadn't said anything.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
good with it.
Yes, me too.
All right. Any more on this before we move on? All right. Dr. Hill, grades, graduation, so on and so forth. Next item.
So, board, as we move forward, obviously there's going to be a lot of issues with how to give credits, how to grade, how to record things on transcripts. So, I just got to explain how much I am, and everybody should be grateful to the curriculum department that has worked uncountable hours to try to figure out what this looks like, weekend hours, night hours, whenever it was needed, and multiple meetings to just come up with some plan, because most of the guidance we get from state reps and federal reps is it's a local decision how you want to figure it out. So they've done an outstanding job to come up with something to propose to the board, and Dr. Aiken is here today to present that information to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you, Dr. Hill. Before I start, I want to reiterate what Dr. Hill just said. I'd like to congratulate and thank our teachers, principals, our instructional coaches, and especially our instructional services directors. They have done what I think is a fantastic job. We continually hear from other regional districts and districts around the state that what we put together is far ahead of many districts, and especially when we compare even to those districts that have kind of an enormous manpower ability, we are equal or better than much of what they have done. So they have spent really ever since March 11th putting this together. So I wanted to give the board a little background and then kind of walk the board through what we put together, and then I do want to share the information that we got last Friday by listening into the state board meeting, and then possibly may request, depending on legal counsel, a temporary revision to one of our board policies. But just to give some background, this process actually started back on March 11th. The directors and I met originally just to brainstorm a series of what ifs. If we were to close school, what would our e-learning look like? That really was intended just to be some brainstorming and get us started. Then the next day was a scheduled district meeting. We always have our small group meetings by grade span in the morning. So we, after talking for a couple hours on March 11th, I asked the directors to kind of continue the conversation with principals on March 12th. Again, at the time, we're thinking this was more of a brainstorming activity. We hoped it would be an intellectual exercise only. Unfortunately, that ended up not being the case with the governor's order coming out on Saturday the 14th. So initially what we had put together constituted a number of steps. One, we had already thought about making sure that we distributed Chromebooks to all 2nd through 12th grade students. So I do want to also thank our amazing technology team that kind of turned that around basically in about 72 hours. We also knew we were going to have a lot of students that would not have internet access, so we'd already talked about how to develop some potential hard copy student packets, sending out level books for our younger students. And then, so because of the governor's orders on that weekend, we did establish a district-wide distribution day on Tuesday, March 17th. We had a tremendous turnout. We had already looked at ending what we call new instruction effective March 13th. The governor later clarified that that's what he wanted as well. At the time, we really were focusing on maintaining instruction where we kind of were and keeping our students engaged. We had looked initially at the model that we utilized in some of the weeks following Hurricane Florence. We heard from a lot of our students and families a strong desire to somehow stay maintained and connected to our schools. So that was initially what our motivation was. So at the same time, during those 2 weeks, the governor had sort of said that we are quote-unquote closed. We had also wanted to provide opportunities for professional development, specifically professional development related to online teaching. As of last Wednesday, over 200 sessions had already been completed by our staff. The other thing that we went ahead and recognized we would need to do was a combination of a welfare check / student by student count of where our internet access and availability would be, so that our staff, when we did move towards potential of a long-term e-learning situation, we really had more than just a district-wide or school-wide view. As of this morning, our staff had completed 8,279 confirmed calls, and that's removing calls where we didn't get anybody. That's the number of calls where we actually were able to speak to somebody at the house, which I think is phenomenal. That's about almost 83%, 84% of that survey completed. So I'm very proud and pleased with that. So during these last 2 weeks, we kind of took all that information. We attended numerous DPI webinars regarding online instruction. We met with a lot of the teachers that conduct online courses either for us or for others. We met with our coaches, we met with lead teachers, and we tried to basically just research out what is the best practices regarding e-learning. We also had some guiding motivation, which was one, making sure that any student who was interested and able to stay connected to school was able to stay connected. Since we were not sure at the time where the state was going to guide us in terms of credits and what would count for instructional hours, we wanted to make sure that whatever we put together had enough meat to it that we could in the future justify any credits or instructional days / hours. And we also had to recognize that we knew that we were never going to get to a point where all of our students would have any access necessarily to online instruction, or certainly not equitable. We have a number of cases where students have reported they have small amounts, limited, or they are having to require on cellular data and hours that they may or may not have unlimited access to. So kind of taking all that into account, relying on some of what we learned from Hurricane Florence, we put together some of the information that was shared in the board packet. We looked at doing it by grade span, and I won't try to take you through all pieces of it, but some of the things I wanted to highlight. We started off by wanting to stick with tools that we were familiar with and we knew our students and families already knew. We are certainly getting inundated with offers of all kinds of stuff right now, but recognizing we would not have time to train our staff and especially our students on any new platform, we wanted to stick with those tools we already knew. Again, we recognize that there are a number of variables out of our control in terms of the lives of our students and families, so we wanted to build something that was as flexible as it could be, both in terms of the e-learning part and also as well how we might go about doing paper pencil packets. I will be very frank in saying that process of the paper pencil part is still an ongoing challenge every time we get new guidance regarding who can be at schools, distance apart, safety protocols. That has had to force us to change some of our plans. We also looked at dividing up expectations by grade span. You'll notice that in kind of the various packet pieces you were given. We looked at making sure that we structured some time each day and tried to make that relative to the development age of the student. A lot of what we heard was around 4 hours, no more than 4 hours a day, and that needed to include both the time you get on the computer and then go do work. One of the things that we definitely wanted to stress was we do not want students just literally sitting and staring at a computer for 4 hours while they do work. We tried to guide people that the total time should be getting online, getting the information you need, getting offline and going and being active and hopefully doing something with it. We've also tried to vary the types of interaction, encouraging teacher-made videos, videos from accredited sources, using notes, holding live Google Meets, which a lot of our staff are already doing, and I commend those teachers for that, and then ensuring time off of the computer. We also wanted to make sure that we didn't lose the normal instructional process. You often hear the phrase me, we, you from a teacher point of view. So the me part being the teacher. You think about the teacher's initial instruction, sharing of some new concept, a mini lesson, something where the teacher is providing some guidance on a new aspect of instruction. Then the we part generally is the teacher and the students working together. So we wanted to include some process by which the student then would have some practice and be able to give that feedback or information back to the teacher for review. And then the teacher would then have a chance to comment, provide some guidance on what the student had done. And then the you part being the student acting, having an opportunity to do independent work, some kind of assessment. So we've tried to incorporate that. We didn't want to lose that natural process. We did understand from everything that we've experienced and what we read that what you might constitute in a normal day will probably take 2 days online. So one of the things we've also had to do as we look at our standards is recognize, kind of like what happened after Florence, we always have essential standards, those parts of the curriculum from the state that are most important. But even within that, we've had to really say, of those essential ones, which ones are absolutely critical, what are our highest priority? Because we know that now the instruction is going to take about twice as long as we normally would. So we have worked to really make sure that the planning process with our teachers working together in either grade level teams or department teams at the high school and middle school level, they are really paring down and focusing on only what is most important. Then the last thing that we really wanted to hit was really encouraging our teachers to work together in teams. We have some folks that the online or blended learning is definitely within their wheelhouse. They're very comfortable with it. They have used it a lot. We have a number of staff members for whom this is a new world. So we've encouraged folks to not try to tackle this independently. Work together as a grade level, work together as a professional learning community, lean on each other's skill sets. We have some who are really great at turning lessons to online. We have some great people who are good at finding resources. Some are really comfortable with technology for holding Google Meets, but rely on each other and go from there. You'll notice that we've also set up kind of a 5-day week process. Really Monday through Thursday, the emphasis is that me, we, you process. We've tried to vary times. We recognize that we can't control necessarily what's happening in each home. We don't know what our students or our families are facing. So we've tried to structure some time because that does help when you've got multiple teachers that a student needs to communicate with. But we've also recognized there's going to have to be a fair amount of flexibility with this. And then in the afternoons, we try to set aside that time for a couple hours to be when our interventionists and specialists can provide supports to students. Then Fridays, we've set aside for a couple things. One is that is a day specifically for our direct services to be able to provide support. So for our EC students, our EL students, our AIG students, those specialists then can have the day to solely focus on working with those students. It's also a time where we have told our grade levels and our subject department teams to get together and look at how the week went, think about the next week, again, start working as a team. And our principals can also use that to hold department meetings, staff meetings, and so on. Taking a look at technology, so again, we just wanted to focus on what Pender County already does well, so we're using our Google suite of tools as the basis for what we're doing. Our elementary teachers, a lot of them have been using Seesaw as a common platform for either instruction or at least communication. So those are the only platforms that we are supporting at all. Seesaw, teachers have been using that one independently. That's not really a district tool. So we've allowed those teachers that are comfortable with it to continue. As a district, Google Suite is our main basis. We've expanded the Chromebook access. Again, I have to thank our technology team. We now have a plan in place to try to get K-1 students access to Chromebooks as well. And we've been able to establish 4 hotspots. The 3 high schools and West Pender Middle School are now regional hotspots. That is hugely beneficial to our community. So again, thank you to our technology team. Did want to mention real quick before talking about the latest guidance we got from DPI regarding student evaluation. We are working with our colleagues at Cape Fear Community College. Last Friday, we received a memo from the Community College System of North Carolina and Department of Public Instruction with some initial guidance on how to support students who were duly enrolled. You may know the community college system across North Carolina largely went all online. Cape Fear did, effective, I believe, March 26th or March 20th. So all of our students who were in that, working with Cape Fear now are online as well. They have the same hurdles that we do. Some classes, that's a relatively easy transition. For other classes, that's an extremely difficult transition. In addition to the fact that we have students that may not have online access to complete the dual enrollment course. We got some initial guidance on how to work through either a withdrawal process or an incomplete process that the students could then pick up that course over the summer or at a future date. So we are working on that as well. Before I kind of shift to the grading and evaluation guidance we got last Friday, any questions from members of the board on all of that? I apologize, that was a lot of information at one time.
I have a question. Are we, as far as the EC service delivery, are we providing related services online, like through Google Meet or anything?
Ms. Burns, that's a great question. Actually, Ms. Martina is here. We are doing the very best we can. We have worked out a number of ways to do some online support services, and then there are some for which the ability to do it e-learning wise is a challenge, to say the least. I'm going to let Ms. Martina come up if she'd like to talk a little bit about what they've done. I actually am very impressed with what we've tried to do, both as we integrate for our students with the core instruction. That I think we are doing an exceptional job of. And then we have tried to find some creative ways for a number of our more related service areas. But Ms. Martina, do you want to come up?
So speech will be the primary platform, primary related service that will be provided through our Google Classrooms. I'm also looking into a teletherapy platform for those individuals to use and it also provides them with some structure and activities that are built into that platform. And I'll be meeting with those individuals on April the 9th. Occupational therapy has a 6-week plan, and they will be pushing out some global activities that most students who receive occupational therapy can utilize, and those videos will be pushed into the appropriate Google Classroom for the students who receive it. Physical therapy is a little more challenging. Our physical therapist is reaching out to some critical cases in which he does some equipment management and services for parents to see what services or support he can offer to those families, and that's where we are in terms of related services. Psychologists obviously cannot do assessments. A large part of their assessments are face-to-face, and they are supporting the district through a weekly newsletter to help families and children cope with the current situation. And that'll go out Monday, first one.
Also just wanted to add.
Okay, what about speech therapy? Oh, sorry.
Speech therapy is going to online therapy. And I will be meeting April the 9th with a company that will offer a teletherapy platform for our speech therapists to see if we can get a more structured approach to the way that we are managing therapy session.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martina, I appreciate it.
It is definitely, requiring us to look at instruction in a new way.
We've got some guidance that's going to be coming out that's rather extensive, dealing with EC requirements and what we're recommending. There's a lot of guidance that's been coming out from the state and federal levels that is changing and inconsistent, and so we're going to be shooting that out to you by the end of the week, by tomorrow, I hope.
I would definitely agree that the information we've gotten from our state and federal officials in that area has been rapidly changing from day to day. I should also mention that our student services team, counselors, social workers, have been very active in trying to maintain a kind of a whole child focus. They have been critical in looking for at-risk students, helping with our outreach, maintaining some Google classrooms where they're offering kind of guidance sessions through Google Meet. So I think we've really put together kind of a whole child approach to this. Our biggest hurdle right now is trying to reach and serve our students that have limited to no internet access on a regular basis. We're working with principals on some ways to distribute information, and we've been working with our local health department and Ken Collins as our lead nurse on protocols that we might be able to use. But I just want to share with the board that every time we think we've had a plan, new guidance regarding health factors have come into play, so we're still trying to work around that. But we'll figure out something for all of our students. So we got that in place, and then last Friday the state board held a meeting in which they received a memo from NCDPI regarding how best to approach student evaluation. One thing I should mention is the memo that has been circulated and used to this point is not actually from DPI to local LEAs. It was a memo written by them to the state board, but that is all we have at this point. As of this morning, we have not, as a school system, has still not received any specific information following that meeting, but that seems to be what's out there to this point. I emailed the board this morning just a copy of the notes that I'm going to kind of go through here. These notes serve basically as immediately following that meeting on the 27th. The grade span directors and Mr. Taylor, serving as our lead for counseling, got together to make sure that we could process this information together. Then we kind of looked at this for a little while, shared it with our principals, and most recently shared it with the cabinet. It is our current best understanding of where DPI wants to go, and I think it also represents a reality of what we're facing with this move to distance learning. So from DPI, a couple things to share that were put in that memo. First and foremost, LEAs were expected to understand that given the current conditions, we are to keep a focus on learning and especially focus on engagement more than evaluation, and that's a direct quote. What we received was for grades K through 11, when learning occurs, it should include meaningful feedback, which that's something that we already support, believe in, and actually have in board policy. They provided 5 factors that would be necessary in order to say that you are fully able to implement remote learning in a way that a district could continue to use whatever grading practices existed prior to March 13th. And I can go through those factors in just a second. Basically, if a district was unable to say they met all factors for all students, then any grading that was used could not negatively impact that student. But nevertheless, in all cases, we are expected to give feedback to any work that we receive from students. All EOGs and EOCs are waived for this school year. Also, in respect to that, the 20% rule that exists for EOCs when we're required to make that 20% of a student's final grade is obviously waived because there are no EOCs this year. BPI and the state board are going to request a waiver of the CPR requirement for this year's graduating class. That waiver has to come from the General Assembly because it's a general statute. If for any reason it is not waived, we have worked out a backup plan utilizing some resources we already had in place for students to be able to access some videos on that. We would already been searching for any students that would not have yet met that requirement, but we are in hope and expecting that that waiver would be in place for this graduating class. And then one that I'll need to come back to at the end, the state board agreed that no LEA may require more than the state's minimum of 22 credits to graduate for this school year. The 5 factors that were put in place in regards to what constitutes full effective remote learning. First one, all students must be able to access the learning and that it's responsive to learning groups. I think our district has done our absolute best to reach 100% of students, but we know there are barriers that are out of our control. The methods for paper pencil versus online learning vary, and our ability and timeliness for feedback will vary. So I think we have done what we can do and are still trying to find more ways, but with the word all students in there, that is going to be a challenge for us. Second factor, maintain consistent communication between instructional staff and students. Again, I think the framework that we have outlined absolutely puts in consistent, regular opportunities for communication between staff and students. But again, there are hurdles that we're still trying to figure out how to overcome. We are putting in place opportunities for communication in paper and pencil, but the time on that will also vary. Third factor, address the curricular and instructional needs associated with appropriate standards. I think our staff has done an outstanding job of working with our teachers to make sure that any units or lesson plans that are being developed are aligned to our standards. Fourth, evidence of student learning must be there. Again, we have put in consistent structures and ways for our students to provide us with evidence of what they're doing in all kinds of different ways. The challenge again is looking at timeliness. Even for e-learning, we don't always know what our students are facing at their homes and their regular ability to access e-learning, let alone the comparisons to paper pencil. But again, I think to the best of our ability, we do have structures in place in terms of opportunity. Number 5, the last one, districts are expected to consider the whole child as well as the home learning environment. I think in many ways for all districts in North Carolina, this is probably the most challenging. I do think we have done a number of things to do this. We've already dispensed Chromebooks 2nd through 12th, and we'll soon be adding K-1 to that. We are working to establish student packets. We have added 4 schools as hotspots. So we are trying to reach out through the home learning environments as the very best we can. Having said that, there are unavoidable and uncontrollable hurdles. We're not always able to know for sure the time available for students to be on devices, presence of adult support. Our students that may have to be caring for younger siblings or caring for older adults. We are, you've already heard about the tremendous work we're doing to access food, but that is going to be a challenge. And of course, we don't always know the student or the family's health at any given time. So those hurdles kind of present inherent challenges to any kind of direct instruction or consistent regular feedback. Some additional guidance that they gave during this conversation, during the meeting. So there is no guidance past May 15th. Basically, we were told that if it ends up looking like schools will be closed beyond May 15th, they will come back with more guidance later. There was no guidance really given on how to calculate final grades. The only conversation was if we were to return shortly after May 15th, school systems will make that call. If we don't, DPI will give guidance on it. The only thing that was said in conversation was a likely avenue to move toward pass-fail, but that was not written nor officially recommended. There was conversation between state board members and DPI regarding whether those 5 factors I just mentioned could be student by student, or did they need to be looked at more whole class or whole school. The answer was a very loud and clear, you cannot look at it from a student by student basis. Doing so would provide some students an advantage over other students that may end up factoring into number of credits earned, possible grades earned, and so on. So the answer was it has to be all students, or you have to look at grading being done in a different way. So from that, the directors and I got together and then later shared this with principals to get some feedback on how best to move forward. I did reach out to some of our local colleagues asking, did anyone feel like they had a system where they could say all 5 factors would be met for all students. And all the feedback I got matched what we saw, which is student by student, absolutely there are cases where it's true, but we cannot say that for all students across our district. So because we cannot say that all students are getting the same exact level of engagement or access to instruction, we made the determination that grades cannot be the sole source of feedback and cannot negatively impact any one individual student. However, we also understand that grading is a very common way of trying to communicate back and forth between students and families. So for those teachers who are very comfortable providing non-grade feedback, narrative feedback, standards-based feedback, that's excellent. They can certainly use that. But we also don't know what will come back May 15th, and we don't want to leave our students or our teachers without any kind of data to make a decision, whether that be possibly looking at pass-fail, whether we may end up saying that we still calculate grades. So what we put together was kind of a look at the teachers can use grades as a means of helping to communicate with students both on their progress toward a standard and also in terms of rated completion. We need a place to put it, so we're going to continue to allow grades to be put in Power School, but they won't be considered official, and because we don't have a system yet for cumulative grades, we're going to not have it calculated at an official grade. Right now it'd be kind of like a teacher's grade book, like we're kind of accustomed to for those of us that taught before Power School existed. But at least that way we do have a record of what's being done and how a student's progressing on those standards. Because we don't know which students may have regular access, which students can get online, to distinguish between work not being returned and missing versus work that's completed and returned, but not necessarily of the quality we always want, we're going to put exempt for work that is not returned or missing. Because we cannot negatively impact the student's grade, we don't want to give zeros out to imply that a student is choosing or unwilling. We don't know that. We have a lot of students for whom they may very much want to be able to do it, but either the time that they have or our ability to get it back is limited. So we're going to mark those as exempt so that we at least do have a record of what the student was able to accomplish without punishing the student. We do want teachers to give as much feedback during the week as we possibly can, but given the pace of a week's worth of instruction and the structure that we can really get in place for e-learning, what we looked at was assigning for elementary 1 grade per week, 1 for ELA, 1 for math, so a total of 2, but 1 in ELA and 1 for math in grades 3 through 5. K2 does not use grades, they already have a standards-based approach. And then secondary, 2 grades per week per subject, and that number is based in large part on that me, we, you process. It would take about a week to get through that twice. That certainly doesn't limit more feedback, but in terms of 2 official grades. We also just sort of put some guidance out that any grades should be standards aligned and based on those prioritized standards we discussed. We're really emphasizing formative assessments right now, because for a lot of our students, that's sort of where we are when you're looking at e-learning. And then again, just reemphasizing that because we do not know which of our students simply cannot get to the assignment, that we're not going to use zeros. Next, DPI kind of laid out what to do with our seniors. So everything that I just sort of mentioned really is a K-11 emphasis. They separated out the conversation regarding seniors. What they shared for our seniors this year was obviously they are our focus. We will absolutely work to continue remote learning the very best we can. We want to keep all of our students engaged, continue emphasizing student growth, and respond to their social and emotional needs, especially our seniors. We also want to make sure that we recognize the work they did up to the point of school being closed. And then right now, DPI is working with our testing and accountability folks on a way to look at a pass-fail for seniors, or a pass withdrawal for seniors because of the COVID-19 situation. So the guidance that we got is specific to our seniors intending to graduate in June. Fall courses, so the last factor for senior GPA will be anything related to the January testing. So if you were in a fall semester only course, a course that started in August, ends in January, first semester, that course obviously you get full credit. Any grade that you earn would go toward your GPA. For students that were in a year-long course where the first semester or the fall semester ended in January, whatever grade a student got at that point would go into their GPA. So any grades for a senior that were earned after January will not count toward the student's GPA. Spring courses. So,
Charles, did you just say will, or you just glitched out a second? Did you say will or will not count towards the GPA for a year long?
The year-long course, the grade the student earned at the end of the first semester, so their midterm grade for a year-long course is the last thing that will count toward the student's GPA. For a year-long course, anything earned after the January testing window will not count toward the student's GPA. For work in the spring semester, senior students will receive a pass or withdrawal based on their status as of March 13th. What we're recommending is that all students continue to go through their online instruction. We think ideally that is best. However, what DPI is also saying is that if the student was passing as of March 13th, the last day of face-to-face instruction, that senior will earn a pass. I think it'll technically be it'll be coded as PC19 for COVID-19. If the student was failing as of March 13th, we are directed, and we would anyway, work with that student, whether that be through that teacher's Google online classroom, potentially moving to our Apex learning system, which is the one that we've utilized the most, or we could look at a couple other platforms, but we are directed to continue helping that student earn a passing grade, which we would do that anyway. If the course was not necessary for graduation, they have advised that we can consult with that student and either withdraw the student or continuing working with the student. Our efforts will be to continue working with any student that wishes to try to earn credits. Part of the conversation I think is very important is while the state board has said that you only need the 22 credits to graduate, we can award any student credit beyond that they have earned. Because we have a lot of students that have dreams and hopes of continuing after their graduation, whether that be to go to a 2-year institution, a 4-year institution, possibly earn something through CTE, that they could work with an employer. We are not going to automatically withdraw any students. Our counseling staff, our CTE teachers, our homeroom teachers, our principals are already working on running reports that would indicate students and where they are in terms of the new 22 credits, whether they are, how they are progressing toward their University of North Carolina school system credits, where they might be on work toward CTE credentials, but we don't want this to impact a student's ability to earn something beyond the diploma. As Pender County has said, our goal is that students graduate with more than just a diploma, and we want to work very hard that this current situation does not keep that from happening. So we will be reaching out and trying to conduct interviews, telephone interviews, whatever, with our seniors to determine what is in their best interest. But we are not going to automatically withdraw any particular student, even if they have earned past the 22. We want to make sure that the students really factor in whatever their plans were after graduation and make sure they still earn the credits that they would like to earn. And then just to make the board aware that for our occupational course of study students, the board reduced the number of hours needed. And I think we've already worked reports on that, and we have just less than a handful of students that are impacted by that, and Ms. Martina and her staff are already working with them. So again, I'm sorry, board members, I realize that's a lot of information at one time. Before I get to the final part in regards to current board policy regarding 28 credits, any questions I can answer on all of that information?
Because I have a question. News and Observer ran a article Friday afternoon after this meeting that laid out the senior guidelines, guidance for seniors. A lot of seniors saw that somehow, and their understanding is even if we go back on May 15th, they're done. Is that how you interpret this, or will seniors be required to come back for the remainder of the school year and any prolonged school year in the end, or are they done if they were passing on March 13th?
Mr. George, that's a really good question. So in terms of meeting requirements for a diploma, my understanding would be the same. They have earned more than 22 credits. They would technically be ready to earn their diploma. My concern for the way that article and some other articles were written was that it discounts whatever a senior's next steps might be. I have a great concern that for any of our students that were looking to go either to a university or earn credits that would save them significant amounts of money for community college, or those looking for work key status to be able to get a job, that the way some of those articles were written sort of discounted that still being a necessity. So if we were to return, then I would see it in my mind, and this is just my mind, very similar that the vast majority of our seniors, even with the 28 credit requirement that we have in Pender County, by their fall semester, many have already met that. We still have some that need to earn course-specific credits, like English 4 being the most common. But that doesn't negate the importance of trying to earn credits that will benefit you either in things you won't have to take at a future institution or opportunities for job and credentials and certifications. So I did see that article and similar ones. In the most technical sense, those students would have completed their requirements for a diploma. I would hesitate to say, though, that they are done because of, I wouldn't want there to be a short-sightedness for whatever their next steps were. So it is probably both true and probably also not the best advice for our seniors at the same time. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Thank you. It did.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a question for the board as well as probably legal advice. The last thing that I wanted to discuss or ask about was the state board waiving. It no longer permits local LEAs to require for graduation credits beyond the 22 limit. I did not know whether that necessitated a local board decision or action as well, or if that the state board's decision negated this year's graduating class anyway. So, Mr. Chair and legal counsel, I guess I need to turn it over to you for next steps.
Well, we should probably revise that policy. The state board's gonna preempt that anyway. But you might wanna, either revise or suspend that policy to the extent that it's overridden by the state board this year.
So just for clarification, Richard, if we suspend this policy, the part for the CPR requirement, we wouldn't have to come back to visit that as General Assembly?
I would not recommend taking action at this meeting to do this. The state board's gonna preempt anyway, but, I'd want to go through this, policy in a lot more detail if we're gonna take any action to revise it or in any way address our local policy.
So we're okay, Mr. Schwartz, if we just come back at a later date once we get an actual memo to us from DPI?
Right, and there's gonna be more guidance and there's gonna be more, there's gonna be more changes. For example, the state board is meeting right now, and one of the things on their agenda is a list of different things that they're going to have to go to the General Assembly and ask for changes on. So that's there's just a whole bunch of stuff that we're likely to see some legislative action on.
Thank you, sir.
All right, well, when do y'all want us to meet again over that? You just want to let us know?
I don't think we need to plan that right now until we see how things develop.
All right, so when it comes that time, just say the word and we'll do whatever. So. All right, anything else on this? Okay. Do we need a closed session? Alfreda, do you have anything for us?
No, I don't.
Okay, before we get much further, hey, can I get, because we've got an answer on the TAs, it may bring up another situation that we may, trying to eliminate, calling another board meeting possibly tomorrow on this one. We've got to talk about, there's been some money that's being sent down for supplemental funds. We're not quite sure about how that's going to look, but since we've got some direction on TAs, there's been some question about time and a half or some sort of incentive pay or what they call hazardous pay in some places. Would the board entertain us looking at that? Because we'd have to have that decision made probably by Monday, wouldn't we, Betsy?
Hey, Steve, this is Rich. There has been no encouragement for that from the state level, and it's being shot down everywhere. It's being raised so far. I'm not aware of any place that's approved it, and the state is strongly discouraging it.
We haven't done our research yet, but I do believe I have seen a lot of conversation between superintendents and different people at different levels around us that are doing that.
You had it announced, right?
Yeah. So
they announced that they're doing it?
Yes, it was on the WWAY website. It said, non-exempt mandatory employees will pay 1.5 times their normal rate when they are working on site. Exempt mandatory employees, excluding senior staff, will receive a stipend of $100 per day.
So we may be calling a board meeting after we look at this. Yeah, I think Brunswick's doing it too.
Brunswick County is doing the same thing for essential staff. So, for instance, if a bus driver comes in and works 4 hours a day, and they usually work 6 hours a day, they get 4 hours at time and a half, and then the other 2 hours is at their normally hourly rate. So they're paid for their full-time work, whether they work 4 hours or not, or more.
All right.
That sounds like we got a lot to talk about.
Yep. So do y'all, I mean, I don't know, what does everybody want to do about that? We'd have to vote on that as well, I'm assuming, correct?
You know, we could just give them permission to look, see what it looks like it's gonna cost us. I mean, then we gotta make sure we have the funds to do it. We can't vote on money we don't have yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with checking on it, but, you know.
I agree, let's just check on it and see what we're looking at. Might as well, it's not gonna hurt anything.
All right, anybody got anything else? Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, just, could I
Make a motion, we adjourn.
before we adjourn,
I'm sorry,
we've been working on something.
I've got one other thing.
Well, and just to make the board aware, while we've been in this meeting, we've had a request from EMS if we have any kind of sanitation materials. So if you see anybody in the buildings, we're actually gathering up anything we may have on desks or cabinets or anywhere. EMS is saying they're detrimentally low, running out of sanitation materials to wipe down things. So we're trying really hard to put something together for them. Just FYI.
Dr. Hill, you broke up. I couldn't understand.
Yeah, I couldn't get that in there. You got a lot of feedback going
Yeah, I
on.
couldn't get it.
Got a lot of wind. So basically, since we've been in this meeting, we've had two or three communications about EMS is requesting if we have any, teachers at the beginning of the year ask for Clorox wipes and things like that. So if we have any of those that we were able to spare, that we go through our buildings and give those to emergency services. So if you see people in the buildings, that's what we're trying to do today, is figure out what we have that we could offer them to help wipe down ambulances and things like that. They're running low on supplies or out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One quick thing, right, while we're talking about, I got a question for Mr. LaFawn while we're talking about cleaning. Is the janitorial staff going in and taking the stuff out of the classrooms and sanitizing the classrooms during this period?
They're not taking anything out of classrooms. They're sanitizing them in their daily activities. Now they have started with some buildings getting a head start on some of the summer activities where they're taking out and stripping floors and waxing and doing those kind of things. But yeah, their daily activities are sanitizing the classroom.
Okay, because they say at Topsail Middle School that they're taking the stuff out of the classroom. Some of the teacher stuff has been broken, and they were just concerned that their stuff's being handled, and they don't know why, because they said they're not doing floors there. They were just moving it in the hallway, cleaning, and putting it back in.
If they're moving it out in the hallway, they should be doing the floors. I'll check with Seth and find out what they're doing. But my understanding was that they were going to start some of their summer cleaning activities early, since the buildings were going to be unoccupied.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody got anything else? Okay, we had a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Who was the motion on?
Rich, did you have something else?
Well, I think
We've got, we're working on summaries on a number of different things that we're going to be getting to you. So just to give you some idea, we're working on a summary dealing with the new state leave that was just put into place on Friday and is probably going to be amended today. We're working on guidance from the governor's executive order, the CARES Act that Congress just passed, and some legal guidance on remote learning, legal issues that are getting overlooked in most places, dealing with FERPA, copyrights, internet safety, cybersecurity, and serving UC kids. And then we've got some guidance, separate guidance coming on serving UC remotely. We kind of disagree with some of the stuff that's coming out from the state, and as I mentioned, it's inconsistent from the state and the feds, and inconsistent within the state and the feds. So we got more stuff that's coming to you.
All right, anything else? All right, we've had a motion, which I think, Brad, you did the motion to adjourn, is that right?
I did the second. I don't know.
Okay, Brad did the second.
I did the motion, Don.
Okay, and Brad did the second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.